Hey guys, how are you? I am going to wait just a couple of minutes, see if anybody hops on. It's Monday night, which means I like to just kind of get on and talk about some things that I've been thinking about this week. And, it's such an uncertain time and there's so many conversations to be had. So I'm going to wait just a couple of seconds for some people to hop on. While I do that, I always like to share that I do these webinars every Monday night. I don't know what's going on with the lighting right now. We don't have blinds, and so the sun is coming in. But I do these webinars every Monday night. And if you ever miss them or you want to go back and see, like, hey, was there a webinar on this? Or if there's something you missed, you can always go visit my website at andymcnair.com/@home-learning. And all of the webinars that I've done are recorded. I post them there when I'm finished. So it's just kind of a repository of all of these things that I share. Some of them are a lot of practical things, a lot of tools you can use. Some of them are just big ideas and things we need to be thinking through right now. But again, you can always find those at andymcnair.com/@home-learning. I'm really excited about sharing tonight because we're going to be talking about something. I feel like I use this word 100 times a day, and that's just intentionality. And so in just a second, we're going to dive into that. But I do want to tell you that at the end of tonight's webinar, I'm going to share something really exciting that I've been working on. If you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you already know what that is. But I'm going to give you guys access to a digital planner that I've created for teachers that really focuses on that intentionality and some things that I think we can keep in mind moving forward. So while we wait, and we're about to get started, but will you guys do me a favor and in the chat, if you're on right now, if you'll introduce yourself. So just tell me who you are, where you're from, maybe what you hope to learn tonight. That just always kind of helps me get going. It's always makes me nervous sitting here talking to a wall and hoping there's people on the other side. But introducing yourself in the chat is always helpful. Hey, Kim Jones and Stacy, so excited to see you guys here. I'm not going to lie, it always makes me nervous when there's people I know watching. But I'm glad you guys are here for sure. Okay, so if you don't mind introducing yourself in the chat, that would be awesome. I see a few more of you hopping on, so I'm super stoked that you guys are here. Again, if you ever miss any of the things, you can always check out andymcnair.com/@home-learning. All right, so this evening we're going to talk about that word intentionality. And I've talked with several districts this week, and it's Monday. That's not true. Last week, I talked to several districts, lots of educators, and I just kept coming back to that word. So much of what I would share, so many of the conversations that we had came back to that idea of intentionality. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to do a quick webinar on that or a quick Facebook Live to just kind of talk about what does that word mean and how can we use it in a way that really makes sense and helps so much of what we're doing moving forward meaningful. And it's not a secret. All of my work is called a meaningful mess, and that is on purpose, right? I'm definitely a mess. This situation that we find ourselves in right now is a mess. But it's our job to find meaning in that mess, and intentionality plays a big role in that. Denise, how are you? I'm glad you're here. Diana and Sally from Illinois, super stoked that you guys are here. Remember, at the end of this webinar, I'm going to be sharing something very cool that I think some of you maybe already know about, but I think that it's something you'll be able to utilize and really be able to put into practice as we move forward with this idea of intentionality. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk about what intentionality is, right? I do this every week. Oftentimes, if I use a word often, I like to be really intentional about knowing what that word means. And intentionality just means being deliberate and purposeful, right? Being thoughtful about the reason we're doing something. And I think that's going to be huge moving forward because we haven't been able to be that, I don't think, throughout this entire situation. And that's no one's fault. That's just the reality of the situation. We were kind of in this place where we had to, I've said every week, we had to be reactive. And so that idea of being reactive and moving from that place to now becoming more proactive is going to be really important. And I think there are some steps we can take in order to do that, whether you are an educator in the classroom, maybe you're a campus level administrator, or even district level administrators, I think need to really start moving toward this thought behind, you know what, we were in this place where we had to react to the situation, but now we have to kind of go into this place of being proactive and thoughtful. Last week, when I was talking with Andrew on our Facebook Live, we talked about that quote from Maya Angelou, and she says that, if when you know better, you do better, right? And that's so true. And I think we've learned some real lessons from the remote learning experience. And moving forward, there are so many things that we don't know, and there are a lot of things that are uncertain, but there are a lot of things that we've learned and that we can use as we kind of move into whatever learning is going to look like moving forward. Okay. Okay, Diana, I'm excited that you looked at it today. I'm definitely going to share at the end of this webinar. I want to jump ahead and show you guys now, but I'm gonna wait. All right. So when I think about intentionality, I was really thinking through this last night and what does that look like? And I really kind of had this picture of somebody who was rock climbing, right? And I don't know if you guys have ever been rock climbing. If I'm honest, I've maybe been rock climbing once. And I'm not talking about rock climbing outside. I'm talking about the rock climbing walls that you do indoors. Those are my kind of rock climbing walls. And we actually, the college that my son is going to go to, when we went and visited, they have a rock climbing wall for their students. And that was really what I was thinking about last night as I was focusing on intentionality. And when you think about those rock climbing walls, there are lots of different ways you can get to the top of the wall, right? So there are, I know this, not because I've done it, but just because I've watched other people do it. When you are climbing a rock wall, you have some options on your footing, right? There's lots of different shapes. When we think about the steps that you can kind of hold on to and grasp, there's different things you can hold on to, and there are also different things you can use to get your footing. They might be a different shape, they might be a different size. So you have to make a decision as you're climbing that rock wall of, hey, you know what? I think this is going to give me the footing I need to get to the next step or to get to the next level. I think this is the thing I need to hold on to in order to get to where I need to get to. And that's what I think needs to happen as we kind of move forward. As districts, as campuses, we need to face this kind of like a rock climbing wall. We have to really think about, hey, is this something that we can use in order to get us to where we need to be? Is this the thing we need to kind of use to get our footing so that we can move up and keep climbing? We're going to have to think about that, and we're going to have to be intentional. And so that means that when we are, whether you're a district, campus, in the classroom, whatever that is, we have to really think through some of these pieces. It can no longer be, we're just going to do this because we're in this situation and we're in a hurry and all of that. We're past that. Now it's thinking through, hey, can we do this certain way, and is it going to work? And I think that's going to look different for so many people. It's going to look different for different districts. It's going to look different on different campuses. It's going to look different in every classroom as well. But the reality is that intentionality that we have, that same intentionality you have as you make decisions climbing a rock wall, I think if that's in place, if we really think through why are we using this tool or why are we using this strategy, we're going to have a much better chance of getting to the top of this wall that we have to climb. All right. All of that being said, I want to talk through really 3 things that I think are important moving forward with intentionality. And some of these are things I've said before, but we haven't really landed there and talked about them. And then others are new. They're things I haven't said before. Yes, Diana, I love that. Even taking the big steps, right? There are points in a rock wall where you have to take a bigger step than you did before. You have to kind of think through, am I willing to take this big step because it's going to get me closer to the top? And I think that's a great point to make. I'm so glad you said that. All right. That being said, the first thing that I want to talk about is sustainability, because I was talking with a district about this recently, and it just really kind of resonated with me that sustainability is going to be important moving forward. And I think that as we're climbing this wall, we have to ask ourselves, what are the things we can put in place that are going to be sustainable? There's a lot of things we can do, a lot of things we can try, and I'm all about risk taking. But I think we have to ask ourselves 2 questions when we are taking risks and when we are asking educators to do things in their classrooms. And those 2 questions are, is it manageable and is it meaningful, right? If it's those 2 things, then chances are it's going to be sustainable. But I can tell you from experience that if it's not manageable Educators aren't going to want to continue to do it, right? We all know that as educators, we're not going to want to do something that's not manageable. We have enough on our plates. But I think also asking ourselves, is it meaningful? Because if it's not, it's a waste of time. Like, let's just say that out loud. If it's not meaningful for our learners, it's a waste of our time and theirs. And so regardless of what we do moving forward, the decisions that are being made, the conversations that are being had, the experiences that are being designed, always come back to those two questions and ask yourself, ask your colleagues, ask your learners, is this manageable? Is this meaningful? And if it's both of those things, check, go for it. But if it's one of those things and it's not the other, chances are it's not going to be sustainable. And so let's just be honest about that from the beginning and have those hard conversations so that we don't do something just for the sake of doing it. We've all been in those places as educators where we get super stoked about an idea and we look really forward to something, and then we do it and it's missing one of those pieces, right? Either it turns out it's not manageable at all, or it turns out it's not meaningful. And so we end up giving up on it and we end up not getting anything from that. And oftentimes that's frustrating, and that's going to be a rough place to be in. So if we can be intentional about asking ourselves those questions one more time, is it manageable? Is it meaningful? I think we're going to be in a much better place moving forward. You guys tell me really quickly in the chat, what do you think about those two questions and asking yourself that moving forward, whether it be about the experiences you're designing in your classroom or the conversations you're having with administration. If you are administration, the conversations that you're having with your staff. What do you think about the whole manageable and meaningful conversation? And I'm going to try to have some wait time here. This is going to get really awkward if you guys don't say anything. Sometimes there's a lag on my end. So if I move on, I'll come back to this conversation if you guys reply in the comments for sure. Diana, that's so cool. Yeah, that's just really comes from my own experience. I just know that there were things that I did in my classroom that I thought were just going to be killer. They were going to be so awesome. And then when I reflect on those things and I think to myself, why did that not turn out as great as I thought it would? It was either because of one of those reasons. It was one of those reasons, right? Either it wasn't manageable or it wasn't meaningful. And I agree that asking those two things can make it purposeful. Denise, yeah, definitely a lot on the plate right now. So if it's not these two things, it's not going to be able to fit on the plate. There's not a lot of room anyway. So we've got to be intentional about that for sure. Okay, so the next thing that I think we really need to be intentional about are these three things: the questions that we ask, the reflection that we require, and the feedback that we seek. So let's just kind of talk through these pieces. I just want to share a little bit about each one and how you can make those happen. You know, I think, first of all, the questions that we ask are going to give us the information that we need moving forward with that piece we just talked about, right? Knowing if something is manageable and if it's meaningful, a lot of times requires us to ask for feedback, but also to ask those questions and to be purposeful and intentional about the questions that we're asking. You know, one of my friends, Carrie Espen, often talks about something called user experience. And she's great at sometimes saying, like, Andy, have you thought about what the user experience is going to be here? It sounds great up here, but what is it going to look like for somebody to actually do this? And that's such a great perspective, because when we think about our user experience, oftentimes we have to ask questions to know what that experience was. So think about the things that you've done, whether it's been shopping on Amazon or going to a restaurant. Oftentimes they ask for feedback or there's a survey or something. That's because they are zoned in on that user experience and they're really thinking through, what did you like about this? What did you not like about this? So it's okay to ask those questions. And in order to know if something is manageable and meaningful, we have to know what that user experience was. So being intentional about the questions that you ask your learners, the questions that you ask parents that are learning at home with their kids, the questions that you ask other educators as you collaborate and learn together, Those are all going to be important moving forward. And we have to be intentional about those. We have to think through, hey, what should I ask in order to know what the user experience is? Or what can I ask in order to know if this is meaningful for them, right? I think that's really, really important. Not yet. We're getting there. Next is thinking about the reflection that we require. I often say, and I say this a lot, but in school, up until this point, we have focused a lot on remembering, right? Remember this strategy, remember this vocabulary word, remember this. And there comes a place where there is a place for remembering, right? But there is a bigger place for reflection. And our learners, I think we saw through this experience that so many of them had no idea how to own their learning, right? We've talked about that in several previous weeks. And a lot of them didn't know how to do that because they didn't know how to reflect. They didn't know how to think about, what does this mean for me as a learner? Or what do I need as a learner, right? Either this is too hard or this is too easy. They have no idea how to speak up for, not all of them, but a lot of them have no idea how to speak up as a learner and say, this is what I need from this experience, right? And to really be able to kind of advocate for themselves. And reflection plays a big role in that. So how do you do that? I think you can do that through whether they are at-home learners or they are in-class learners, making reflection a priority every single day. One of the ideas that I've had recently is to it's simple, right? Just use Google Forms and create a form that says something like, what did you like about this experience? Where did you struggle in this experience? And then on Google Forms, you can even let them rate the experience and say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, this is what I thought about this. Asking for that feedback and giving them an opportunity to identify, hey, here's what was meaningful for me, and here's what was hard for me. That gives you, just those 3 simple questions gives you so much information, right? I know just from that form, either that kid's ready to go deeper or that kid may be struggling and I may need to provide something for, extra support. Or I may need to provide an opportunity for them to just kind of stay where they are, right? They're not ready to go to either place yet. But thinking through that and really being intentional about giving kids that opportunity to reflect on Google Forms. Maybe you ask a reflection question in Flipgrid and let them respond. Both of those ideas really will, I think, set your kids up to understand what reflection looks like. Diana, I love that. She says one of the things that she likes to use is, I used to think, but now I know, right? And that's awesome because that gives kids an opportunity to see their growth. And that's huge. I think so often, I work a lot with gifted learners and I do a lot of work in that world. And so often our gifted kids don't really realize, not all of them, but some of them don't realize that they need that growth, that there is still an opportunity for growth. You don't know everything yet. But thinking through, I don't know everything right now, and there's still something I can learn about this. Another thing that I like to implement is something called a KWH LAQ. So actually here, I'll put it in as a banner so you guys can see it. A KWH LAQ. So let's kind of talk about what that is because it has a lot to do with questioning. A KWH LAQ is, most of you have done some form of this before, and you may have done the whole thing, but I love to kind of use this as bookends with a learning experience. So letting kids think through at the beginning of an experience, what do I know? What do I want to know? And how am I going to find out, right? That's kind of the question piece. Then the end of that is the LAQ. So then you could ask, what did you learn? What action did you take? In other words, what did you do with it? And what questions do you still have? What are you still wondering? What could you go find out on your own? So a KWH LAQ, using that as a bookend for your learning experience, not a bad idea. And I think something you could use to kind of make your questions really intentional and give them the opportunity to reflect and offer feedback. Feedback plays right into the reflection idea. In order to give feedback, they have to reflect on the experience. And feedback is important, and learning how to give meaningful feedback, right? I think what we want to do as educators is be intentional about not just ask something like, did you like this? But ask them something like, Did you enjoy this experience? And then why or why not, right? And help them understand it's okay to say this did not work for me. It's not okay to say this sucks and not give me any other feedback than that, right? You have to give me something else in order for me to make this better. So asking for the questions we ask, the reflection that we require, and the feedback that we seek, I think are things that we can be intentional about moving forward, weave into so many of the things that we're already doing, so that, again, that work is more intentional, that it's purposeful and deliberate, and there is a reason behind what we're doing. All right, you guys tell me in the chat kind of what you think, where you are. Does that make sense to you? Is that something you could see yourself doing? What are your thoughts? And I'll try to be patient. And then we have one more point, and then I'm going to show you a couple of other things. I love that, Diana, having them back it up with reasons and evidence, such a good idea. That whole, even when they're giving their peers feedback, that's a good idea as well. Don't just tell somebody something isn't great, or tell them just that it is great, right? You got to tell them, you've got to back it up with reasons and evidence. Such a great idea. Okay, so moving forward, and you guys keep commenting, I'll watch your comments and see if anything comes in. The last thing that I want to kind of talk about are those relationships. And as we kind of go through this, there are several, all of a sudden I can't talk, several relationships that I want to kind of hone in on. The first relationship is that relationship with our learners. And we just talked about how we can kind of build that through asking them questions, getting their feedback. I will say that the best way to build relationships with your learners is to not just ask for their feedback, but to act on it, right? If I'm a learner in a classroom and my teacher asks me for feedback and then actually does something with that and says, hey, you said that you didn't like this, so I kind of tweaked it a little bit and did something different. As a learner, that means something to me because you listened to what I said and you did something with it. I know that when I was in the classroom, I look back and I remember times that I asked for feedback and I didn't do anything with it, right? I asked for them to tell me something and then I didn't react to that, or I didn't act on what they said. And man, that's one of the regrets that I have, and something that I tried to kind of change moving forward in my last few years in the classroom. So really building that relationship with our learners. Now, that's going to have to be really intentional when we think about the situation we may find ourselves in, right? If we have at-home learners and we have in-class learners, both of those sets of kids deserve a relationship with you as their educator. So we're going to have to really think through, hey, what does it look like for me to build a relationship with my in-class learners? And what does it look like for me to build a relationship with my at-home learners? Because both of them deserve that. So I would encourage you to be intentional about that and to really understand that that's going to be important. Building a relationship with home. That's not just for your at-home learners. We have had an opportunity. That's one of the opportunities I think we've had in this experience, is that we were able to kind of create this relationship with home and school. I know that wasn't the case across the board, but it's definitely stronger than it's ever been, right? It's definitely, there are definitely things in place now that were not in place before. So I just want to say, like, don't end that relationship. Like, continue to do those weekly Zoom calls with your parents. Continue to keep those connections, because that's an opportunity that we don't want to miss moving forward. We don't want to lose that connection that we've had and that connection that we've put in place. Really something to think through and make sure that you're intentional about. If I were you guys, I would just go ahead and decide, you know what, I'm going to do a Zoom call every Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. I'm just going to be there. And if anybody's there and has questions, comments, concerns, that's going to be in place. Again, that's going to require intentionality. We're going to have to be purposeful about it. We're going to have to be dedicated to that. But that homeschool relationship will continue to be more important now than it's ever been before, as we kind of navigate these waters that we haven't been in before. And then finally, your relationships with your colleagues, right? The people that you work with. I think it's important right now, you know, Texas, those of you that are in Texas just released TEA, their asynchronous plan for learning and what that needs to look like. I think it's a great idea to start forming committees around that and building these relationships of, hey, what is this going to look like? How are we going to do this? And how can we innovate kind of within this box, right? There are things we've been told we have to do, we need to do. So how do we innovate within that? And how do we do it in a way that works for our campus or our district? I think that doing that, forming those committees and creating relationships between each other will start to set up an opportunity for things to become more cross-curricular, right? The better our relationships, the more likely we are to say, hey, what are you doing in your classroom? And how can I connect that with my classroom? I think it will make this year that we know is going to be difficult, right? Let's just be honest. There's going to be a lot of challenges ahead. There's going to be things that we're going to have to figure out as we go. Those relationships with our colleagues are going to be really important. And there's something that we're going to have to value, something that we're going to have to cultivate, and something that we're going to have to really be intentional about in order to make this year, I think, as easy as it can be. It's definitely not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. But having those relationships with our colleagues can play into, I think, setting us up for a much better situation. So being intentional about the relationships that you, and I like that word, right? Cultivating those relationships. I think about my plants here at home, and when we knew quarantine was going to be a thing and we were going to be at home, I decided, I'm going to go buy all these plants and I'm going to learn how to keep them alive. And sadly, a lot of them are not still alive, but some of them are. And I think about that's exactly what I've had to do every day is really cultivate and go out, and I have to take care of them, and I have to be intentional about it. I was thinking about that the other day. I thought, you know what? I think in the past, the reason I haven't been able to keep so many of my plants alive is because I wasn't intentional about it. I would just get them, and for whatever reason, I thought they were going to take care of themselves. I'd water them every once in a while, my mom was always like, just say a few words to them. I'm like, okay. So all of those things, but they don't take care of themselves. I have to be intentional. And I actually have 2 hanging baskets outside that I am proud to say have been alive for a long time now. And it's because I love them and I think they're pretty. And so I'm intentional about taking care of them. And so cultivating them, I think moving forward is going to be important. Let's see. Diana has a quote. What happens tomorrow depends on what you do today. So true. I mean, gosh, if I could sum this webinar up in one statement, that would be it, right? These things that we're doing right now and that we are intentional about thinking through and really, going back to that rock climbing wall analogy, when we think through those things, we make better decisions, right? If I'm just willy-nilly, randomly choosing what step I'm going to take or what I'm going to hold on to on that wall, chances are I'm going to eventually fall. And we may have places throughout this journey that we fall, and those will be lessons that we learn. But if we can be intentional, it gives us a much better chance of making the progress that we need to make in order to be successful. Okay, so I hope that those pieces, right, thinking through all 3 of those things, being manageable, asking yourself, is this manageable? Is this meaningful? That's what's going to result in things being sustainable. Being intentional about the questions we ask, the reflection we require, and the feedback that we seek will be important as well. And then finally, cultivating those relationships and being really intentional about that, I think, sets us up for better success, right? There are going to be bumps along the way. There are going to be things throughout this year that are going to be really difficult. There are going to be some things that we're going to have to learn from in the moment. We will have to have, there will be times when we have to react. But the more proactive we can be, I think the better off we're going to be, and that intentionality is going to play a big role. Okay, I want to show you guys one more thing before I head out this evening. I'm probably going to do a Facebook Live on this week just by itself, but I wanted to make sure that I introduced it to you guys while you were on. One of the things that we can do in order to be intentional is to plan. And I'm not going to lie. If anybody asked you, is Andy McNair a planner? Or if you asked anybody that I know, is Andy McNair a planner? They would laugh so hard because I am not. I do not plan well. However, I do enjoy designing experiences for learners, and I do like thinking through that and what that can look like. So I, this weekend, decided I've wanted to do this forever. And this weekend, I decided, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to design what I wish I would have had in a planner as an educator who liked to design experiences. And so I did just that, and I want to show you guys kind of what it looks like. You can see here, this is the front page. Obviously, maybe not obviously, let me tell you guys why I chose this graphic. I'm a big believer in the fact that we do a lot of surface level stuff in education. And I think it's the things beneath the surface that really result in meaningful learning. And so that's kind of the whole reason I chose this graphic and why that's the cover. I called it a meaningful mess because that just describes me and the work that I do. It couldn't describe me any better. So you'll see these different tabs. And so each tab represents a month. And so when I choose a month, let's say I choose August, the first page is an opportunity for me to be intentional about goal setting. So I'm going to ask myself, what are the goals that I have for myself as an educator? Next, what are the goals that I have for my students? And then what are 3 things I'd like to try this year, right? Or this month? Would I like to try a new tech tool? Is there a strategy that I read a blog post about, or maybe I saw a webinar or a Facebook Live? Just writing down 3 things that you would like to attempt at some point that month. So this page is all about goal setting. Next is just a place for you to plan monthly, then weekly. This is my favorite page, and I've changed this up a little bit. So if you've seen this template, it just kind of has some new features, new ideas. I've changed some of the icons. This is an opportunity for you to design an experience, whether that's weekly or it's daily. So if you're going to design experiences daily, then you would just make a copy of this slide for however many you need. Let's say you're a high school teacher and you have to design, 5 or 6 experiences. You would just make a copy of each one of these. Each one, this is the weekly. If you're going to design a weekly learning experience, spoiler alert, they look exactly the same. I just wanted people to know they had the option. As you kind of look through this in edit mode, you'll be able to add your content. So I could plan here and say what standards or learning outcomes I have, my class or subject. I put this here because when we are intentional about that reflection and we ask our kids, hey, did you like this? Did you not? If most of them say this was terrible, we never want to do this again, it's a good idea to document, hey, you know what? This is not something I want to do. So going ahead and deciding and documenting after the experience, either this is a keeper, this needs some work, I need to make some changes to it, or never again, like this was a terrible idea. I don't know what I was thinking. So I like that just because when you go back and you look at your experiences, maybe the next year, this will at a quick glance help you remember, was it really good or was it not really good, and think through that. Those other pieces are the pieces that I've talked about every single week, right? That engage piece, that willingness to invest, the experience, the opportunity to learn. What is that going to look like? And the empower piece. What are the connections that can be made? Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm advocating for this to look the same for your at-home learners and your in-class learners. I don't think that educators should be expected to design for both. I think that you should design one experience that should work for both of those types of learners. Over on the side, there's the enrichment and encouragement piece that we've talked about so often, right? Being proactive and intentional about thinking, hey, what do my gifted or high achievers need from this? How can I give them an opportunity to go deeper? Or my struggling learners, right? What am I going to do? We know that those kids are going to be there. We know that we're going to have kids who are ready to go deeper. We know that we're going to have kids who are going to struggle. So let's just go ahead and think through what we're going to do for them when that happens. And then at the bottom, there's just those pieces you can weave in, those life-ready skills, social emotional skills that are so important. So that's kind of the planning piece of the planner. Let me show you really quickly a couple of other things. Each month has a weekly reflection. You'll want to make copies of this. Just an opportunity for you to each day write a quick reflection of that day. Hey, here's what went well. Here's what didn't go well. Here's what I would do differently. If you need a reflection question, I've created a randomized QR code. And when you scan that code, it'll just tell you it'll give you a question to answer, right? But getting in that habit and being intentional about reflection makes the experiences that we design moving forward more purposeful. So definitely you want to think through each day, just making that a priority to reflect and document that reflection for sure. Okay, just a couple of other pieces that are here, and you can click on tabs, but I'm going to go here and show you. It obviously walks you through how to use each piece. I obviously have a page in here for you to document your core beliefs. What do you believe every learner deserves from the learning experience? Just so that when you're designing these experiences, you remember, hey, if I believe every kid deserves the opportunity to experience new learning, what does that look like? And what am I doing in the experiences that I design to make that a reality? Again, being super intentional about that. At the end of the planner, there are just some things that I think educators might like. So for example, if you're going to professional learning, I think it's important to, kind of document that learning and reflect on that. So before you get started, what do you hope to learn today? Your notes and ideas and connections from the learning experience. And then what's your biggest takeaway and what can you implement immediately? That way, I don't sit through 6 hours of training and get nothing out of it. I'm going to be intentional about thinking through, what does this look like and mean for me as an educator? And then finally, there are just some notes pages for you to use. And again, you can copy these and duplicate them to however many you need. So your planner may be, 160 pages by the time you're done. Also, you can download this as a PDF. And if you have an iPad, you can put this in GoodNotes or whatever, and you can use it with your iPad pencil. Just something that I think it's just what I could have used as an educator. It makes sense to me for a planner to look like this. So how do you access this? Where do you find it? You can find this planner over at andymcnair.com/planner. And it's absolutely free. The only thing that I ask is that you share your email address with me. I send emails out once a week. And one of the reasons I did that was a lot of times I'll be sharing updates to the planner or things that I've added. And I wanted to make sure that you guys would have access to that. So all you do is put in your name, your email address, check the little box, and you'll get access to the planner. Totally free, no charge. I just wanted to put this out there for you guys to use. Okay, that was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I hope that was helpful. I hope the planner is helpful. I know that you guys have so much on your plate. There's so much to take in and so much to learn. But gosh, what an exciting time to be an educator. It's hard and there are so many hard decisions being made. But we are in this place where education is going to change, right? There's going to be some real, I think a lot of impact will be made through how we do things moving forward. So I'm not saying that it's not a difficult time to be an educator. Don't hear me saying that, because that is definitely the case. But it's all about, our perspective and really seeing some of the opportunities as well as the obstacles. And I love that the Meaningful Mess community is so supportive and so collaborative. I just appreciate you guys hopping on every week and learning with me. Again, if you ever want to find any of the webinars that I've shared, if you've missed some of them, you can always go to andymcnair.com/edhomelearning. You can always reach out to me through my website, send me an email. I'd love to connect. Thank you guys so much for joining me this evening. I appreciate you more than you know. The work that you're doing does not go unnoticed for sure. All right, you guys have a good night. Get some rest. I'll talk to you soon.